Let's get to the bottom of these recent COVID-19 employee leave extensions. We've had 2 recent updates within a week of each other. First, we're going to recap what we've already had over the past year so everyone can be familiar with the acronyms. We've had 2 kinds of COVID-19 employee leave, the first being EPSL, or Emergency Paid Sick Leave, the second called EFMLEA, a type of FMLA called Emergency Family Medical Leave Act. Here's the scenarios. If you're sick with COVID, if you're quarantined regardless of symptoms, if you're home caring for a family member in that scenario, or if you're home because your child or dependent has school or care facility closed due to COVID, all of those scenarios fall under EPSL. You can use it for any of them. It's emergency paid sick leave, it's full pay, it's 80 hours available, unless you are part-time or extra help, in which it's prorated based on the amount of hours you've worked per week over the past 6 months on average. You can use EPSL for anything. One of these scenarios, the one at the bottom, if you're home because you have a child or dependent who's stuck home due to school or care facility closures, you can continue to stay home using EFMLEA. It's not full pay, it's partial pay, 2/3 wage, so you would need to supplement the remaining 1/3 with your choice of leave, and it's up to 12 weeks available. Actually, it's 10 paid weeks after a 2-week grace period. Just to illustrate again how it would be if you are home because you have a child or dependent whose school or care facility is closed, the first 80 hours or 2 weeks of time you could use EPSL. It's full pay. The remaining 10 weeks, or the equivalent to 10 weeks, you can use EFMLEA. It's partial pay, 2/3 of the rate. And the good thing about both of these types of leave is that they're used either in full or in increments as small as 1 hour at a time. This was all set up back in March 2020, and it was scheduled to expire at the end of last year. Right around the turn of the new year, this was all extended to March 31st, this last month. The hours that we could use were not increased, but the time we had to use what we had left increased. Now, this past month, it was extended again, and it first was extended due to ARPA, or the American Rescue Plan Act. This happened on March 11th, signed into place by Joe Biden, and here's what it did. EPSL, we got a complete refill. Everyone's bucket was topped off at 80 hours, or 2 weeks, or partial amount if you're extra help or part-time. Everyone was maxed out at 80 hours, no more, no less. If you hadn't used any, you still had 80. If you used them all, you had 80. If you used partial, you have 80. Everyone at 80. What happened with EFMLEA was, again, no additional hours, unfortunately, just an extension of the ability to use any existing hours, similar to what happened for us in January. Not real great. Within days of this, California passed their own act, the Supplemental Paid Sick Leave, on March 19th. And the county, after looking at both of these, decided that the California plan was better. So we're sticking with the California plan. Before we go into what's changing, the actual name of EPSL is changing over to SPSL. Everything the same so far, except it's called Supplemental Paid Sick Leave instead of Emergency Paid Sick Leave. California is calling it Supplemental because it's tagging on to the existing EPSL. EFMLEA's name does not change. SPSL, formerly known as EPSL, can now be used up until September 30th. As before, everyone's buckets are going to be topped off at 80 hours, just like ARPA did, or 2 weeks. It's a refill of any of our used hours, and everyone is maxed out at 80 hours. But in addition to what we can already use what is now called SPSL for, you can also use it for time off to get your COVID vaccine, or if you've become sick from the vaccine. This is retroactive back to January 1st of 2021. So if you've had to use any of your own personal accruals, vacation, or sick time because of those 2 reasons, all you have to do is put it to be used under SPSL instead, and you'll get that time credited back to your own personal accruals. EFMLEA has experienced a few changes as well. The extension for EFMLEA is up until June 28th, and it can also be used for those two same reasons. So, for example, if you've used up all of your SPSL, but you need to get your COVID vaccine or you've become sick from the vaccine, you can use EFM-LEA for that as well if you've already used up your SPSL. The best part about EFM-LEA is that remember those first 2 weeks that are unpaid? It's kind of a 2-week waiting period up until you hit the third week and then you start getting paid. California decided to completely waive that waiting period. So now EFM-LEA from the start is 12 real weeks. Anyone who's used EFM-LEA up until this point, even those who have used all of it, everyone is now getting an additional 2 weeks of EFM-LEA. And that's because of the fact that those of us who've already used some of it did not receive 2 weeks in the beginning. So we're all getting that credited to us. If you haven't used any, you have 12 full real weeks, or the equivalent of 12 weeks in hours, because you can use them individual hours at a time. And even if you've used them all, you have 2 additional weeks now. The best part about that is that, but then also, you can use any SPSL that you have to supplement that a third, so you don't have to dip into your own personal accruals. So the best idea is, if you're going to have SPSL now because everybody's been gifted 80 hours, or at least gotten to the point where they have 80 hours max, I should say. If you need to use EFM-LEA, you can use SPSL to supplement that time. Here's another quick rundown: SPSL, EFM-LEA. The only changes to SPSL is that we've all been replenished to where we are all at 80 hours, effective April 1st. You can use it for all of the existing scenarios as before, in addition to time off to get your COVID vaccine, or if you've become sick from the vaccine. Those 2 additional options are retroactive to January 1st. SPSL is available until September 30th. With EFM-LEA, you also can use it for those 2 additional reasons, which are also retroactive back to the 1st, but EFM-LEA is available until June 28th, and it's now 12 real weeks with no waiting period. So everyone gets an additional 2 weeks now, regardless of how much EFM-LEA we've used. Remember, it's partial pay at 2/3 of your regular wage, so now that there's no waiting period at all, if you do need to use EFM-LEA at any time, you should utilize SPSL as the supplement for that additional 1/3 of your wage, because of the fact that both of these leaves will have their own expiration dates. Whether or not these leaves are going to be extended again come June and September, it's likely, but we don't have that information usually until it comes down to the 11th hour due to federal and state timing. If you have any questions about any of this, your best bet is to contact your payroll clerk, ideally via email. And if you need to use one of these leaves, it's always best that you notify your supervisor first so they're aware, and then, as before, email your department's payroll clerk.